IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I am Suyash Desai. As you are aware, the Indian Armed Forces have long deliberated and prepared for a two-front situation. However, India is not the only country facing this scenario. Apparently, the People's Republic of China has been involved in similar kind of situation for some time now. I am sure we have heard very little about this. There are military texts in China in the form of Science of Military Strategy and other texts which are not out in public domain have been discussing how and when can China prepare a scenario on two front. To discuss more on this, I am joined by Megha Pardhi, who's a research analyst at Takshashila. Hi, Megha.
Hi, Suyash.
So, Megha, before we get into the details of two-front scenario or two-front situation, two-front dilemma, whatever you want to call it, can you please explain in simple terms what is a two-front situation?
Thank you. So, I think if I have to put it very simply, two-front war is basically two countries engaging with one country simultaneously on two different geographical locations. So, for example, if we take case of India, then Pakistan on one side and China on another side would be an example of a two-front scenario. But there are different, nuances of this also. Like when we, for example, say different war, we generally refer to full-fledged war. But there can be tensions at two fronts, which can again escalate into conflicts and then wars. China, India, Pakistan, and India, China is an example. Then there are two-front conflicts, which are a little below two-front war stage, but more, serious than tensions. So there are different aspects of this, two-front warfare scenarios, which involves different level of escalations.
So Megha, I would like to interrupt you here. If there are conflicts or tensions with the same country on two different sectors, so would that be counted as two-front conflict, two-front war, two-front scenario?
So, I mean, generally, when we say two-front conflict, there are two different states involved. But I think technically, yes, we can say that because again, two geographical locations are involved. So there are two, and if opposing country, like for example, if India and China are involved, hypothetically, then a conflict on eastern and western sector would be called as, and if India's two different, type of forces are involved, then can be called as a two-front war, technically.
So just for the audience sake, I'm clarifying what is eastern and western sector. So India and China are involved in dispute in three sectors. Eastern sector is Arunachal Pradesh. Central or middle sector is Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. And western sector is where all the current activities are happening right now in Ladakh.
Thank you, Suyash. That is actually very important since India is very involved with China for a very long time. I think this clarification. So, Suyash, can you explain what is China's two-front dilemma and what are the potential flashpoints?
Yeah, Megha, that's a very interesting question. Thanks for asking. From an Indian point of view, when we think of two-front situation, we think about India and Pakistan, and we think that India is the only country which is challenged due to such geography. But that's not the scenario. The People's Republic of China, that is the mainland China, is also facing a two-front situation. In fact, they have faced this situation for a long time in history, and they have defined their two-front very vaguely. So before venturing into discussing what is two-front for China, it is important to remember that when People's Republic of China was formed, there were many territorial and land disputes, almost 24 if I'm not mistaken, on every side. It's a huge country and on every side there were disputes with every other country. Now there are only 6 disputes that the People's Republic of China faces. 2 of them are land dispute with India and Bhutan, and 4 of them are maritime disputes: East China Sea, South China Sea, Taiwan, etc. Mostly the maritime disputes are in on their eastern periphery, and land disputes are on their western periphery. But China has select military texts in China have gone beyond what they called as conventional two fronts. And I'm purposely using military text. It is very important to remember that Science of Military Strategy and such publications are not doctrines, but they are military text. It's a very big difference. So select military text have used internal dimension as well as external threats as two threats. So, for example, in case if the party, which is the most important aspect of China, the Communist Party of China, if it is threatened by insurgencies in Tibet, just an example, or Xinjiang, and simultaneously there are escalations on the eastern periphery. In case in scenario with in the Taiwan Strait, which China defines as its primary military strategic direction since 1993 guideline, so that could be also defined as two fronts. If considering what is happening right now. So if you remember Megha in 2020, India China got involved into land border in Ladakh. Huge escalation happened on both sides, where the forces came in front of each other, and simultaneously, US had changed its approach to South China Sea in July 2020. After which, a lot of posturing and maneuvering started in South China Sea. Also, a lot of things in 2021 happened in the Taiwan Strait, where China PLA was doing a lot of maneuvering activities in skies over the Taiwan Strait on the southern end, southwestern end of Taiwan. So these are also classic examples of two front tensions, where tensions were external on both periphery. But if there are insurgencies inside, if there are problems inside which could threaten the Chinese Communist Party, if there are problems in Tibet, if there are problems in Hong Kong, alongside external problems, this could also be defined as their two front situation, an internal front and an external front. So the military texts in China, repetitive military texts have unique term to define it. They have called it as chain warfare. Why do they say that? Because one thing leads to another. As you have seen in the Cold War, there was a domino effect. It is something like this. One falls, everything else goes for a toss. So if there is an internal problem, which China always accuses that Western powers are meddling into the mainland, if there is a problem within, it can lead to a spiral of problems which could impact the legitimacy of the Communist Chinese Party to rule the mainland. And so that is why two fronts are being very broadly and vaguely defined to adhere and cater to all these problems, be it internal problems or be it external drivers. Megha.
Yeah, this is very interesting, Suyash, because when we generally think of two-front war, we generally think of external components, not the internal factors that could affect or that could also be seen as, engaging in war. This is very interesting. But let's go back to external factors for a while. So, if we see China, what are the potential external flashpoints do you see where China can engage in this, two-front kind of scenario?
So yes, Megha, there are a combination of multiple scenarios that we can imagine when we are thinking of PRC's two-front war or two-front dilemma. These flashpoints could be on the western periphery, these flashpoints could be on the eastern periphery. For example, considering what is happening right now, if India, China are in problem, and if something happens in Senkakus, which is the South China Sea, or Paracels, which is again South China Sea, or in the Taiwan Strait, and that can be two front scenario. Very imaginable two front scenario because that is already happening right now. Then there are other things like something is happening in Xinjiang. There is a problem in Xinjiang and something happens, or there is a problem in Tibet and something happens on the east. Then again, that's a two front scenario. If there are tensions in the South China Sea, which they are always are, and if India tries to, hypothetically, if India tries to do something simultaneously, then that's again a two front scenario. So I'm saying that the determinant of two front scenario could be any country or an internal problem, any country trying to do something or any country which is compelled to do something. We can also think of Japan. We can also think of North Korea. These are so if you draw a line of probabilities, India, Taiwan, and internal factors are more probable because they are already in action in China in different capacities and different degrees of escalation. But Japan, North Korea, these could also be other possibilities, rare possibilities, but possibilities where China could face actions on multiple fronts or tensions on multiple fronts, to be very precise. So, Megha, now that we have discussed what could be potential flashpoint, do you think China desires the possibility of a two-front war? So, let me put it very simply. Are they willing to handle such a situation? Are they willing for such a situation, and will they be able to handle it if it happens?
So Yash, first of all, let me go back to this scenarios and possibilities that you explained. It's very interesting actually to see that China views even internal components as internal actors as in their two front calculation. Because generally, when we speak about two front kind of military scenarios, we are generally thinking about external actors, not internal actors. So this was very interesting. Now coming back to your question, so yeah, I don't think no country would realistically, desire this kind of possibility. I mean, even if they are willing and even if they are capable of handling such confrontations, they wouldn't want it. China is a very big country, and even if they have different theaters, logistical, challenges of handling such war would be very, I think, difficult for even for China. But then again, there is, this slight hypothetical possibility that, for example, if China is engaged in one war on one front, and if they themselves think that a war on another front would boost their, internal security or their internal approval of party or leader or something, there might be a possibility of some conflict or tension or something like that. Like for example, even during this pandemic, when India and China were involved in tensions and conflicts on LAC across LAC, Taiwan Strait was also heated up. So that this is a hypothetical example, but yeah, again, I don't think China would ever desire anything like this.
So let me try to sum up, Megha, what you have already said. So you're basically dividing it to push factors and pull factors. Push factors is where China is compelled to go into two-front war. So if, for example, if India, China are already in tension scenario, like what is happening right now, and something happens on the eastern periphery where United States tries to take advantage of it. So that can be a push factor. And pull factor is where something is gone wrong terribly domestically in China. And generally, what countries do is to divert the attention
Yes,
by
exactly.
making an outside
Yes,
enemy.
exactly.
So that's the pull factor. I'm correct in summarizing what you are
Yes,
saying, right?
yes, yes. So yeah, I didn't term it as a push and pull factor, but again, yeah, exactly the same.
Correct. So that's very interesting, Mika.
Yeah, but again, if you see Suyash, what challenges do you think? Like for example, let's say hypothetically, a two-front or multi-front war breaks out. What challenges do you think PLA will face, like People's Liberation Army of China will face in such scenario?
Now that we are talking, Mila, that's my favorite topic to always highlight that despite all the modernization that they have done, they have all the challenges in the world. So I could think of the one primary challenge that I could think that China would be facing is the logistics. Any country cannot fight a war if their logistics are stretched. And a two front scenario is a very difficult scenario. So China is already facing a problem of long distance deliveries. They are aware of this challenge and they are taking steps towards that. For example, there are specific type of modernization where such delivery capabilities are focused on. They are also undertaking logistics. And so, for example, the 2015 reforms which Xi Jinping initiated, of which the three forces were created. The third force was the logistic support force, and we have seen the role that it played, a very important role in the pandemic, during the pandemic. And I'm sure they're very active in India China situation where a lot of logistics is basically required for the posturing that both the countries are doing on the border. So, logistics being a major challenge, I would not say that China has completely taken care of it. There are still limitations to logistic delivery systems, but they are acutely aware of this problem and trying to overcome this with various things. Then the second important challenge is regarding manpower. So generally, as we have seen, I'll give you an example, Megha. If something is happening on the borders with India, then the Western Theatre Command, and more specifically Xinjiang Military District and South Xinjiang Military District and Tibet Military District would be responsible or would be the first actors that would get activated, followed by Western Theatre Command. But under the new reform structure, Western Theatre Command would be supported by Central Theatre Command and up to an extent by Southern Theatre Command. So a lot of troop movement happens across theaters when such escalation take place. And these are overriding moments. For example, if something happens in Eastern Theater Command, which is Taiwan, then again, Eastern Theater Command will be responsible primarily, but it would be supported by Central Theater Command and Southern Theater Command. So the basic point is if two theater commands are in action at the same time, then apart from those theater commands, the reserve forces from Central and Southern Theater Commands would also be stretched because they have twin responsibilities. Manpower reserve forces, I'm talking about. So that is another unexplored scenario. I am not saying that that couldn't be done, but that is something that China is yet to explore. So that is why there are questions regarding that. And the third and the final point regarding challenges is regarding the theater command structure itself. These are very new structures. Previously, China used to operate 7 military regions. Before that, it was 12, then came to 9, then 8, and now 7. And now they under the new reform structure, they have converted it to 5 theater commands with the operational responsibility. But because there has not been any war or conflict yet, there were limited escalations with India and on the eastern periphery. We don't know how these data commands interact with one another. Is there a seamlessness? Is there in distribution of resources, not only manpower resources, but weaponaries? Is there a seamlessness in distribution of assets like SSF? What role will the SSF play in this? Because as you are aware, all other forces except SSF are divided within these theater commands, but not the SSF. We are not completely sure of how it operates yet. So all these are tricky questions. I'm again not saying that this would not be done, this cannot be done, but there are still questions because of the unexplained nature of challenges which China has not faced before. So these are the important challenges I think China would face. If the scenarios are internal and external, then again, yes, it's very well taken care of. The armed forces can take care of armed forces and militia can take care of the external problems, and the PAP can take care of internal problems. And there are many other domestic operators that can take care of internal problems. But two external problems, I think it's something that China is still thinking, deliberating upon. And this is an interesting space to watch in the future.
That's very interesting, Suyash. Thank you. So before we move on to our next question, let's take a short commercial break and we'll be back in a short while.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IBM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Mudit Dandwate, CEO and co-founder of Dozy, tells Cyrus how he built his health tech company and survived a crocodile attack. On The Longest Constitution, Priya tells us about the history of the rights of the disabled. This started in the 1970s with the Organization of the Blind. On a show about crypto, Rohan is joined by Kash Danda, who's a founding member at Superteam DAO. They discuss whether Solana is an Ethereum killer as is commonly believed in this space. On Press Decode, Sarah and Vagda discuss the acquittal of Bishop Franco Mulakkal and whether the beautification of Purani Delhi strips it of its charm. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav tells us the surprising story of how money orders, Dehradun, and the transatlantic slave trade are all connected. Do follow us on social media. We're IBM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And also remember, you can check out a lot of our stuff on YouTube. Go to ibmpodcast.com/YouTube and you'll get a list of all the various channels that we do have. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. Somewhere I had read a few days ago, or I think a few weeks ago, that China has been conducting some simultaneous exercises along Yellow Sea and East Sea. So I believe that they are possibly thinking about these problems, right? There was this, I think, Reuters news on that. This China conducting exercises on multiple fronts.
But Megha, think about this. They have, so if you talk of multiple operations, it's generally Navy in different seas. There have been very rare, I'm not saying it has not happened, but the instances of cross-service exercises
Yes.
happening has been very limited. Joint operation, and which is what they are planning for. If you see the latest guidelines in 2020, they are looking for integrated joint operations. They are focused on the word integrated, which means cross-service military operations. I have been following PLA for 3-4 years, and there have been very limited instances where cross-service integrated operations have been noted. I give the benefit of doubt that I might have missed something, but as far as what I know, it is not very frequent that such operations or military exercises have taken place in China. So it's still a brewing process. Let's see what happens. It's a interesting space to be in the future.
Surely, yeah. This is actually very interesting topic to follow, actually.
Okay, thanks Megha, thanks. This was a very fascinating discussion that we had on the PLA. For more such update, keep on listening to All Things Policy.
Thank you, Suyash.
Thanks Megha.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
You're the people pleaser, right? Or then desperately seeking the one? Or wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.
What is the workplace and how does your gender and body affect your right at work? Hey, I'm Priya Mirza, and on the Longest Constitution podcast, we critically examine the vision of the Indian Constitution and laws. In season 1, we looked at sex, gender, sexuality in India and the landmark judgments which transformed our rights as citizens in this country. In season 2, we discussed the laws which shape the workplace and examine how ability, competence and merit impact us, and much more. Join me, Priya Mirza, every Wednesday only on the IVM Podcast app, website and all the major podcast streaming platforms.